You're listening to Where We Are, a weekend conversation on faith, politics, family, and culture, hosted by me, Michael Ware, and my wife, Melissa. We bring our wide-ranging experiences in politics, ministry, and nonprofit life to bear as we discuss the issues of the day. On this week's episode, we'll be taking questions from you, dear listeners. This is Where We Are. Well, hello. This is Where We Are. We are the Wares. I'm Michael.
I'm Melissa.
Melissa, it's one of my favorite, probably my favorite kind of episode. Listener questions from the audience. I'm excited for the questions we have today. Our listeners always send in good ones, but glad to be with you. Glad to be recording with you. I just got back from travel. I was in Atlanta, Chicago. Thankfully, I don't have to travel this coming week, and then it just kind of gets crazy. But we're here together now.
We are.
It's where we are. Yeah.
I know. I was about to do the pun, but yeah, people have heard that from our mouths too many times. But do we want to get into it?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. So our very first question is, what do you think about the new child poverty rate stats? Now, over the past few weeks, the Census Bureau has come out with new data on the supplemental poverty rate, which is a certain kind of way that you measure poverty, and it includes the influence of government assistance, so the role of the government as well. And so that's why it's called the supplemental poverty mechanism rate. And for the child poverty numbers, they're pretty staggering. So in 2021, child poverty rate actually went to a record low of 5.2%, and we're going to get in why it looked like that. But in 2022, that's our latest data, it went from 5.2% to 12.4%. So more than doubled. Pretty deplorable number. So Michael, get into it. Why does it look that way?
Yeah, so often when you see, when you're assessing something like the poverty rate, it can be difficult to come up with a simple explanation.
Yeah.
Something like poverty is
complex,
multi-causal. And, this is not one of those cases. We know why the poverty rate looks the way it does now compared to last year, and it's because Congress let the expanded child tax credit benefits expire. And I think this is particularly disheartening because it is rarer than you would hope and maybe think that public policy has its intended effect. But the expansion of the child tax credit benefits is one of those things that did have its intended effect. It drastically reduced child poverty, and like a functioning government, you might say, would keep on doing what is working and stop doing what is not. But this is like one of those cases where they stopped doing what was working. Now, it's important to just say, right, President Biden wanted, first of all, it was President Biden that fought for the expanded benefits, along with Senator Cory Booker, Senator Michael Bennet in the House, and Democratic leadership. Biden wanted the benefits extended, and in Congress declined, principally Republicans. Like that's just the fact of the matter. And so, yeah, these numbers are expected. They're also, behind these statistics are people. Like these are children in poverty, and so I'm disheartened. We've talked about this issue on the show before. We talked about the expansion of the child tax benefits when they were first put in place. We talked about them as Congress was determining whether they would continue. And so this is a sort of a new hobby horse for us. We've followed these issues for quite a long time. I think the last thing I'd say, Melissa, is one of the frustrating things out of this is just the cynicism of folks acting like, saying that this is happening on, child poverty has risen on President Biden's watch, without adding the context of, because the policy that he wanted to be put in place couldn't get through Congress. And obviously we've criticized, this isn't about criticizing Biden. It's you really can't, shouldn't, it's misleading to talk about the child poverty rate rising without talking about what the cause of it is, and it's the fact that this policy was not continued. Melissa, anything you'd add there?
No, I'm not going to add anything. I think you've got it covered. So our second question is, who will be at the top of both party tickets in 2028?
Yeah, well, what would you say, Melissa?
Yeah, so I think one of the more interesting threads that it's not just permeating the conversation on the primary right now, or on the Democratic and GOP primary sides, but we've also seen it in Congress conversation around this, but it's age. And I'm loath to say that any sort of topic that is happening now in 2023 will be a driving factor in 2028, but we all know that the campaign will generally start around 2026. And one of the things that I think could carry over from what we're talking about now is this conversation around new blood, new faces, younger people running for anything, let alone president, but even in Congress. And so I think that age could be a factor for both parties, but probably more on the Democratic side. You've got Kamala Harris, who will most likely, we should be talking about her when it comes to 2028. But the other person, if I were to pull out a crystal ball, would be, I'd say, somebody like Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in Congress, will be, I think, a factor in 2028.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I'll just, so I think the age thing is really smart. Because presidential elections are so often reactions to the previous presidential election, I tend to not look ahead to beyond beyond the next election. So I don't really have a ton of thoughts. I do think Buttigieg is someone who still is looking at a national future.
Yeah, for sure.
Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, she's someone who is clearly sort of eyeing national office. On the Republican side, I just think it's going to be really so much is going to be determined by not just who wins the nomination this year, but how the general turns out. So, but yeah, those are good thoughts.
Okay. And our next question is, what is Project 2025? Yeah, so this is a really interesting one.
Yeah. So I don't know. I kind of wish that we had a call-in show so that I could ask some questions of the person.
Where did you hear it from?
Yeah. Project 2025 is a conservative effort facilitated by the Heritage Foundation to basically provide a roadmap and infrastructure resources for what they hope would be an incoming Republican administration in 2025. This kind of thing is not new. This is what Heritage Foundation sort of exists for. It's what Center for American Progress on the left exists for. It's why that these organizations so often, the people who work there often came out of the administrations of their party, sort of their side of the aisle, and often these institutions are where senior staff are drawn from for incoming administration. So, for instance, Neera Tanden works in the White House right now. She ran the Center for American Progress, and so it's not. It's this kind of thing is not new. Project 2025, though, is at least presented as being more robust, more explicit, more transparent than some previous efforts. It's Heritage has something like 70 other conservative organizations that are part of this, and I do think it's a reflection of conservative disappointments over particularly the opening 6 months of the Trump administration in 2016, where they were slow to staff up. They felt like they left a lot on the sort of policy-wise unaccomplished. And so this is very explicitly an effort to give not just a playbook, but the players to run the place to an incoming administration. So that's what this is. Now I will say, right, because it's so explicit, because it's so public, it's like an easy target for the left. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're going to hear quite a bit about it. It's also, the last thing I'll say is it fills a void.
That's right.
The Republican Party in 2020 did not have a platform.
Yep.
It's very possible they don't have a platform again in 2024. And so, Project 2025, part of it is, they have these policy commitments that they're, going to hold the incoming administration or provide the administration with, depending on sort of what kind of language, what the relationship is there. But so this is kind of a de facto, if Republicans win the White House, this is one place to look for an idea of what you can expect out of a Republican government, because all the conservative organizations are sort of are behind this. I will say, and not just Project 2025, but I think these kinds of efforts, generally speaking, like when they happen on the left too. Like what they're trying to say is like, no matter who wins the Republican primary, they're there to implement a conservative agenda, which to me, like, kind of undermines the point of having a primary, undermines leadership. So I am kind of this sort of administration in waiting kind of thing. Just I'm a little I'm discomforted by it, I guess. Though I don't think there's necessarily a solution for it.
That's interesting that last comment you just made, because one of the things that I thought when we opened up the website and I was just reading through the various bits, but I immediately was drawn to the partners. And on the website, it's 70 of the most major conservative think tanks, nonprofits, advocacy organizations out there. And I thought to myself, well, this is really interesting in terms of like, I also was not comfortable as well with the administration and waiting part. But then for a GOP that's been really fractured since Donald Trump, rose up, where you've had like a few different factions, and honestly, since the Tea Party really came about, that it's just really interesting from a unity standpoint. Obviously, it's not every single conservative advocacy organization out there, but it's pretty much the most powerful ones that have the most influence and the most money. And so for a party that's been thirsting for some kind of unity, you kind of get it with this administration in waiting. So
I mean, especially right to the extent that they can extract and the whole point of this is to extract commitments and use is sort of have this frame the primary. So have the candidates endorse Project 2025 or be clear about exactly what they disagree with, and sort of set the terms not just for an incoming administration, but obviously to influence the primary as it plays out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So our next question is a grouping of questions, because we actually receive questions quite often around parenting. Because if you're not a longtime listener, you should know that Michael and I are parents to 2 toddlers. And so in a lot of ways, these questions come out of that. So what has made your toddler cry this week? What are our thoughts on gentle parenting? And how do we handle discipline for defiant toddlers? Now, in terms of making what has made our toddlers cry this week, my question then is, what has not made them cry? They are 2 and 4, and therefore they're both in different stages of toddlerdom for absolute certainty. And with their crying comes different complexities. But, for example, we started school in the last 2 weeks, so there's been a lot of gnashing of teeth over school shoes, over which kind are being worn and how they fit, and how quickly I am getting them on. And I mean, there's been a lot of crying this week over, in Baltimore, ice or snowballs, snow cones. I mean, in Buffalo, we grew up with them being called snow cones, but here in Baltimore, there's snowball and ice places that pop up in the summer and usually stay open in September, where, well, one of our toddlers is very obsessed with it, and there was a lot of crying over whether or not we could go and get ice this week. But Michael, definitely we have thoughts on gentle parenting. And if you want to jump in.
I mean, right, like to the extent that, like, I think a lot of things get called gentle parenting.
And not really sure if it is.
I think you never know if you're critiquing a caricature or the real thing.
Yes.
I think children need boundaries. I think a sort of child-directed family life does not work as a constant. Like I think children can't direct things all of the time, and so to the extent that a gentle parenting means that you're not that some things aren't happening, then I'm opposed, to the extent that it's a reaction to uh, sort of a harsh, cold, unemotional parenting. And right, I think that's the main thing I'd say. So many of these parenting trends are driven by people just reacting to the childhood they had or the childhood
Yes.
they feel that they had. And so, I think that's part of why we have, this whole conversation now. But yeah, Melissa, do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on gentle parenting?
I mean, if gentle parenting means that, we're helping our kids learn that emotions are part of life and part of the human experience and part of how we process the world, then yes, we're gentle parents, like helping them cope with all of the bad things and the upsetting things and the uncomfortable things in life. Yes, I've tweeted about this before, and it was actually a pretty popular tweet where I'm constantly apologizing to either of my toddlers for losing my own cool when I'm asking them to not lose their cool and to emotionally regulate. I've discovered in parenting that I actually need a lot of tools and a lot of help in that area. So, there are certain things that, Michael and I absolutely believe in and probably are part of that school of thought or trend. And then, like, the whole limit setting, boundary setting, we definitely have rules, we definitely have red lines. I think that actually goes more towards like another philosophy. But here's the thing that I just want to mention with this question, because Michael, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, on Instagram, you sent me a post by one of the there are many parenting accounts on Instagram, especially, where what they do is they provide information on a lot of these different parenting philosophies and techniques and trends, or like, how to do discipline with your defiant toddler, which is the last question for us, or, how do you get through potty training, like, basic stuff as well. But this parenting account put out a new study that says that the more information that parents have about parenting and how to do parenting, the less secure they feel in their parenting and the more anxiety they feel around their parenting. And I thought it was just really funny that a parenting account that makes money off of providing a ton of information bravely sharing if you have too much information, you're probably actually feeling pretty poorly about how good of a parent you are. I thought that was interesting, but also definitely I resonated with it immediately, because Michael and I have often talked about it, that it's not just parenting trends, which have been there for quite a while. I mean, you go and ask your own parents and, they'll tell you about the trends that they had and the different bits of advice that they were receiving when they were raising us, whether or not you're a millennial or Gen X or Gen Z, is that we have more and more information available to us than ever, and a lot of people with the interest of making money off of our anxieties, that I have felt like I know too much sometimes, and I have found that I have been worrying over very, very small order things with my kids because I have read a post, or I've read some bit of advice in a book, and I have found it to be very distracting, and I have definitely lowered my consumption of, again, for example, like Instagram type accounts in this way, and I have felt a lot better about my parenting from sort of cutting myself off in that way and trying to concentrate on more naturally parenting our two kids with, trial, which is basically trial and error, with discovering what it is that makes them tick and what it is that helps them to emotionally regulate. And so how we handle discipline for defiant toddlers, the first thing I want to say is that with the 2-year-old, and Michael, you've always said this, with a 2-year-old, there is no disciplining a 2-year-old. 2-year-olds are just at the beginning of their toddlerhood and just at the beginning of being ridiculously irrational and having basically no hand-eye coordination. So they are trying to assert their independence and their dominance, and it's basically a lot of redirecting with a 2-year-old. And then with the 4-year-olds, I don't think we've actually figured it out yet, but we have a few different techniques, like taking a minute, or spending some time in our, a couple of minutes in our room if we're really out of control, and just to go to a space that's different than the one that we're in, where we are losing control, natural consequences. But I don't think we have a set answer here, Michael.
Yeah, there's not like a discipline regimen, because again,
They're
they're
gonna do what they're
toddlers.
gonna
They're
do.
toddlers. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the next question, what is Michael's favorite chapter in the new book and my favorite chapter? And so for those who don't know, Michael's a brand new book called The Spirit of Our Politics, coming out in January 2024. It is fantastic, but you have not released a lot of information about the contents of the book. So how revealing do you want to go here, Michael?
Yeah, so not very. I think I think what I'm prepared to say is this, which is we will announce the chapters for the first time on this podcast. So in the coming weeks, I will read. We'll read the chapter titles here on Where We Are. The book comes out in just over 4 months, so January 23rd. So more information will be coming, but yeah, I think in the next few weeks we'll do that. But yeah,
Can I at least say which number?
sure.
Okay, my favorite chapter is chapter 6, which will mean not a lot to people, but I will tell you that Michael, in the writing process, the first 5 chapters were just a huge slog, because basically you were coming up with you were taking a lot of the problems that we're facing in our politics, and you're coming up with a bunch of concepts, especially because this book is based on Dallas Willard's teachings and thoughts. And so you took, his writing, his thoughts, and you're applying them to politics. You're basically creating a good handful of brand new concepts that I haven't read anywhere else. But chapter 6 is kind of like, okay, what do we actually do? What will the world actually, well, the world meaning more like American politics, what will that actually look like if we put some of these concepts and this way of thinking into place? And you wrote that chapter pretty darn quickly, even though you had been so nervous about it, because you knew it was just like the climax of the thesis of your efforts. But you barely had to edit this chapter because it was just, you have everything so locked down tight. It's just a really good chapter.
Yeah, I spent so much time thinking about that chapter that when I finally was able to get myself to sit down and write it, yeah, it was all there. So yeah, chapter 6, and in the next few weeks you'll know what that chapter is.
We're such teethers.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is a song that we can't stop listening to?
Gosh, my musical taste
It's all over the place.
all over the place, but also just songs I can't stop listening to are at best 25 years old, 20 years old, usually 60, 70 years old. And so, for me, it's Me and Those Dreaming Eyes of Mine by D'Angelo. Can't stop playing that. I can't stop playing Maxwell. There are 2 new songs. So there's a singer-songwriter, Katie Grayson McLeod, I think. She has a song called Complex.
You love that song.
And I just think it's a great song. I'm not a big singer-songwriter guy, but this yeah, I really appreciate that. And then there's this a singer, musician, Haley Knox, that has a new song called Future Me. And I just think the concept of the song is just so smart and so well executed. And I just think she's a talent. So yeah, those would be 2. If I'm gonna try and be with it and be up to the times, those would be 2.
Yeah, so I I have always loved pop music, like really good, basic bubblegum pop music. I did have like a millennial emo streak, and I've always loved classical and soundtracks as well. So I'll give you three songs in the bubblegum pop category. I love most pop music that comes out of the Nordic countries. So there's two singers. One's named Dagny, and she's Norwegian, and her song "Bright Sider" has been on repeat on Spotify to the point where it's probably going to make my Spotify top 100. It might end up being the number one song. But Bright Sider is like the perfect summer song if I could ever write one myself. And then Winona Oak is a Swedish singer-songwriter, and her song Baby Blue has been on repeat for about a year now. I cannot stop listening to it. Both of them are just really well done pop. And then ever since we saw Oppenheimer, I've been listening to the one song called can you hear the music? And it's like the most famous one that has come out of the movie so far. It's only like 2 minutes, and apparently the composer changes rhythms around 20 something times in the song, and yes, you can tell, and it's really intense. I think it's a gorgeous piece, and so I've been playing that on Spotify as well.
All right.
So how much pasta do we eat in a week, and is there any good gluten-free pasta? We've gotten the gluten-free pasta question before, but we'll always answer it. I think Banza brand, which is chickpea pasta, the cavatappi, because it's a nice substantial pasta, can take the weight of having no gluten. I think it's good. I think it's pretty well done.
Yeah, sure.
And then how many times a week do we eat pasta?
Yeah, I mean, probably not as often as folks would think, given that we do a monthly pasta ranking on our podcast. But yeah, maybe like 2 or 3 times. I think the girls love box mac and cheese. We'll do like a pantry pasta once every week or 10 days. And then, I do like meals that create leftovers that have like pasta as a course, and we've talked about this on the show before. But so usually there will be like a very simple pasta, like mac and cheese. There will be like a middle ground, and then especially if I have time to like really cook that week, we'll a more complex pasta that takes some more time.
Okay, so what is our favorite bottle of wine under $50?
So it's such an interesting question because most of the wine that we drink is like under 25.
Yes.
And honestly, my answer for under 50 and under 25 is the same. So Michele Chiarlo, which is a maker out of the Piedmont region of Italy, they have a great Barbera value wine. Usually can get it for like $18. It's fantastic. I love it. I always have it at home. And so Chiarlo's Barbera is great. Look at Chiarlo generally though. They make a great Moscato. I'm not a Moscato guy, but they make a wonderful Moscato. So they're fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm not a big drinker. I rarely drink alcohol, and I actually don't like wine, which is wild being married to Michael because you just love Italian wines. But there is an Italian rosé that my friend introduced me to over the last year. It's from a brand new vineyard called Montestigliano, and this rosé is delicious. And you can buy it directly from Montestigliano's website because it's not really sold here in the US yet because it is so brand new. But you can buy 3 bottles in a package, and they're 23 euros each. So, a little bit of a nicer rosé compared to, Michael and I, we tend to buy like $6 rosés, but it's fantastic. Like, can definitely compete with French rosés for sure, I would say. But our final question also related to our favorite drink. So what is our go-to bourbon-based cocktail?
Yeah, I don't have anything to count like an old fashioned. Yeah. I'm an old fashioned guy.
Yeah, you like Manhattans too.
Yeah, sure.
But I always love eating the cherries that come with your Manhattans. So I like when you order Manhattans over old fashions because I really like the the
Yeah.
cherries and the syrup that come with it.
I will say I have been making like my own at home bourbon cocktails, and I
Oh,
do
yeah.
like bourbon with a little bit of like walnut liquor.
Yes.
And so I have been doing that. Yeah.
I do, because if I'm going to have a spirit, I'm going to have gin. But if I were to have a bourbon-based cocktail, I really like amaretto. And amaretto sours, I think, are delicious. And I think amaretto sours are actually made better when they're made with bourbon, as along with the amaretto in it. So a bourbon-based amaretto sour, I think, is actually really tasty. I think it's a good fall drink too, actually.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it.
And I'll just I do like putting a little bourbon in with apple cider. And
Oh,
so
you
we
do
are,
love that when we get
are
the fresh
getting-
apple cider. Oh, you're gonna have that soon.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, that's good. Good questions this episode. Really grateful for our listeners.
Yes.
And we made good progress on them. But I think that's it for this week.
That is it.
And debate is not this week, but the week after.
Yep. Soon.
In California, and so we'll have the next debate in the Republican primary, and yeah, we'll see what this week holds in the news. But we'll be with you as always for the morning 5 throughout the week, and then I'm excited. We have some guests coming up on the podcast in future episodes, and should be good. But
Yeah.
that's all for now. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
It's the end of the weekend, but I still wanna turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up. All I want is to go.